Hello and welcome to another brand new chapter of Mint's Pivot of Very Series, where we discuss and debate the key transformations that businesses are undergoing as they emerge from the pandemic and the challenges that they face. The theme today is the very critical technology and automation sector. The sector, as we all agree, is the most important in the times that we live, where social distancing has become the new normal, and life as we know uh, is going to be increasingly dependent on technology going forward from here. Everybody agrees that. So please join me in welcoming our stellar panel this evening. Joining us live is Ms. Sangeeta Gupta, Chief Strategy Officer, NASCOM, Mr. Prakash Malia, Managing Director, Intel India, Mr. Kamal Singhani, Managing Partner, IBM India, Mr. Dallas Krishnan, Area Vice President, Salesforce, and also joining me is my colleague and co-host, Prasid Banerjee. So without taking more time, let's get straight to the issues which are at hand. All of you panelists, you are in a very unique position. You work across sectors, you work across companies. You have a 80,000 feet view. At the same time, you have a very ground view. How are you seeing the recovery happening? What are the changes on the ground that you are actually seeing in the last maybe a month after the lockdown has started easing? And even during the lockdown, technology has played the most important role. I'll start with Sangeeta, and then I'll go to ask the same question to all our panelists, and we'll go to other questions after that.
Thank you so much, and it's a real pleasure to be here along with such esteemed panelists. I think if you look at technology and automation, I think it's been very nicely said that I think COVID-19 accelerated digital transformation of 3 years in 3 weeks, right? So clearly, I think even during the lockdown and of course in the unlockdown phase, we've seen more and more adoption of digital technologies and automation across sectors. The IT industry in India has been a more global industry while it works also in India. But I think the feedback that we are getting from a lot of our members is clearly that there is increasing interest on from their global clients on digital solutions, automation solutions, whether it's on supply chain management, whether it's on remote collaboration. So clearly, I think the opportunity for technology-led automation has never been better from my perspective.
Right. Let me go to Mr. Malia. Your views. How are you seeing the recovery? In the ground.
Hi, good evening to all of you, fellow panelists, as well as all the audience online. It's great to be here. Let me build on what Sangeeta also mentioned just now in terms of the vantage point she and the NASCOM team has. I would agree that digital transformation is a thread that we are clearly seeing. And when you look at Intel, we look at India in two different ways. One is India for India, the way we call it, where it is a local consumption, and India for the world, because we also engage with global partners like Wipro, TCS, Infosys, Cognizant, who are actually driving digital transformation for the whole world. And when you look at local consumption, the demand has been strong, especially in areas like consumer, because of education being a need. Online education is the only way forward. One instance, the overall cloud consumption has picked up dramatically across the board, and you see the same trend globally as well. If you look at hyperscalers, and the demand that you have seen on cloud has accelerated globally as well, so very consistent there. And when you look at automation in terms of work from home, there is also business continuity planning demand has gone up significantly in the first half of this calendar year. We see that demand continuing for some period of time, both globally as well as in India. And some part of it is getting shaped by the global system integrators, because they do fleet management and workplace transformation solutions for clients across the world, Fortune 1000 companies. So that's the lens I would come in with. Demand is pretty strong. The challenge, though, as we navigate through this COVID-19 and post-lockdown scenario, is the supply chain, on how efficient the supply chain is, on how non-disruptive the supply chain is today to be able to serve that demand effectively and predictably.
Right. Let me go to Mr. Singhani. Sir, what has been your experience? And also, if you can just share some understanding what were the immediate requirements once we went under lockdown. What was the conversation like with all your clients? What were which end of the spectrum they were looking to sort of address first?
Yeah. So good evening, everyone, and thank you all for having me here. Coming to your question, Devashree, I guess the way the things are moved during the lockdown, the entire focus of the enterprises have gone more from for specific to automation from cost specific or cost reduction to business continuity and resiliency, and that is what is kind of impacting the demand. Most of our the clients that we work with, whom we are interacting with, for whom we are giving mission critical solutions or digital applications and solutions, they are all looking forward to embedding automation first primarily on business continuity and resiliency. So this entire workplace automation, etc., has kind of taken a step ahead. We are also now seeing the narrative for the automation shift from a typical old narrative of return on investment from automation to the resiliency that these automations will bring to my business. How will this helps me keep my business and my lights on, and how it helps me engage with my customers better? Because with no physical workforce in place, the need to connect digitally with your consumers have gone up, and then that is where entire narrative is more about how do I connect more rather than what is the ROI on automation, because that's now probably is the question which is second or third in the list of priorities. Uh, then what is now happening here is at various industry levels, the demands that we are seeing and the focus that we are seeing are very different. Financial services, specifically banking and insurance, they have been pretty ahead of the curve in terms of adoption of automation. They have more or less adopted quite a significant automation in their business processes already. What is now happening is they are looking at embedding automation for decision making, because more and more expectation from their consumers are that the decisions from these bankings and insurance companies are much faster than what it used to be, and that is where the entire automation and the digital workplace is kind of pivoting to, in terms of how does it embed the digital decision making capabilities. uh, the other industries like retail or industrial manufacturing and all that, I would say they are still to catch up in a sense. Retail has been pretty digital upfront, so there is nothing, no strange or new things which are happening, and industrial manufacturing is still catching up. But these are the specific trends that we see on these two industries, that they are still catching up. They're still more focused on how do they get the cost takeouts, or how do they get the basic core backend processes automated, whereas banking and insurance, they're all looking at a front end automation as well as back end automation. So that's a change and the pivot we are seeing it. In terms of the consumer behaviors, I guess what is happening is people have become far more digital savvy. So monetization brought us to a level one of the digitization, I would say. uh, Pandemic of COVID and the lockdown and a post lockdown has taken us to maybe 4x or a 5x level of digitizations. So that way everybody is now far more digital savvy. But now that's a story for the cities, tier one cities and metros. The rural side is still not as digital savvy as possible. So how do you get that part of the spectrum, or that part of the pyramid, into the automation and into the digital world? I guess that's what everybody's still grappling with, and we don't probably see people having good or right or a great answers there.
No, absolutely. Very valid point. Mr. Krishnan, how are you addressing this?
So, first and foremost, thank you. Thanks, Deboshi, and really wonderful to be in this panel with this esteemed guest list. And welcome to all the viewers who are around watching us, right? So three things. First, the first phase of this, the moment the lockdown started, first reaction was more around safety. If you really think about it, people were trying to just accept the new normal. Look at the first aspect was about human safety, employee safety. So those were the first, wanted to know where the people are, how they're doing, is there anybody impacted. So the first phase, we started seeing this reaction of trying to stabilize the operations in the new normal, right? And as we started moving towards the unlock phase, is when we started seeing a lot of discussions around, okay, I am reopening, uh, you know, so there is an employee safety aspect of it. But the other aspect that people are trying to do is, how do I operate in this new normal? How do I digitize a lot more of my operations? How do I engage with my customers? How do I engage with my employees? How do I tell my employees what they need to do in different scenarios, right? And then, of course, the third phase, which I think we are seeing it in different parts of the world, depending on how different countries have crushed this curve, right? So there are three models out there in terms of crushing the curve. So so there are countries where we are seeing people are re-looking at business models in the context of growth, right? I can even talk about, I was talking to the CEO of one of the countries, and he was talking about their conversation with the CEO, where the country is starting to see shipment levels at the levels of Christmas, right? So think about it. This is Christmas coming early, and those levels have sustained for about 4 months, right? So that's a phase where I think we are getting into. As our economy continues to open, as we start reopening, as businesses will find new ways to operate, as consumers will get back to their spending behavior, there is a latent demand for sure, right? So people are starting to get ready for this new normal. And what I would want to advise people here is start thinking about 4 months of Diwali, right? So there is the 4 months of Diwali demand. Start thinking about it and start planning for it.
No, I agree. So I think there is a fair amount of agreement on the part that things have to go digital. But coming to the other question, these are uncertain times. Economic uncertainty is something that most people are grappling with. It was earlier people were hoping things will better in the next 2 months. It's now looking to the at least the first half of next year, unless obviously there is a vaccine or something like that. Uh, Cost is a big factor, especially for businesses which are not large corporations. For them, it's a choice that they have to make. Do you invest upfront on technology now and wait for the returns to happen over a period of time? How do you do that? I mean, what are the solutions? Maybe I can ask Sangeeta about it. You work with a lot of companies yourself, which would be at a startup stage or just beyond that. What are you advising them? What should they be doing now?
So I think it's a great question, right? Because companies are facing a lot of cash issues at this moment. And while I think they all understand the importance of digital and automation, there is a pressure on costs that they are going through. I think our advice to companies is to obviously prioritize the immediate areas that need investment. I think the providers are obviously open to newer models, whether it's about, I think, the evolution and how SaaS has grown, because software as a service is a great model where you don't have to pay upfront on everything, or a cloud model is a pay as you go model. So I think increasingly getting companies to look at newer models which are in the as a service economy, I think is one way to manage cash flows and take that forward. I think if it's a very extensive custom deployment, then obviously companies are looking at newer business models, which could be on risk reward, outcome driven, taking stakes in the company. In fact, there's an interesting example of a company from India who was working with a global client. And they said, we've partnered together to create a product which was initially meant only for that client. But today we're taking it out to other customers also. I think there would be interesting ways where I think new business models or collaboration solutions will emerge as driven by the current crisis.
Right. No, I agree. Let me ask Mr. Malia. Intel just put so much money in Geo. It was last week. So are you looking? Of course, Geo is an outlier in many ways. But are you looking at this opportunity where you can partner companies where cost is a big factor? And I'll ask everybody the same question after this. How are you viewing this whole cost question that companies are faced with now?
At the highest level, if you look at the purpose of our company, and I believe the first and foremost for any company to look at is what's the purpose it serves, because it is not only about running the business, but it also is about taking care of the employees and taking care of the community, which is the part of the ecosystem that the business operates in, right? And if you look at Intel, our singular purpose is to create world-changing technology to enrich the lives of every human being on earth. And how do you basically translate that purpose into shaping the dialogue with our customers, partners, and consumers, including our employees? So if you ask me, what are we trying to do through this crisis? The first is listen very closely and deeply to our customers and partners on how we can help them get better through technology. And I'll give you a few reasons why I believe it can solve. Technology will play a pivotal role in the crisis, in my opinion, and some of the panelists already mentioned that. One aspect to consider is the state of automation in India today is not the highest. If you look at SMEs, there is 7 crore entities in the country, and you are contributing to 1/3 of the GDP approximately. The level of automation in SMEs is not very high as compared to other countries in the world. So definitely automation can help SMEs ride this crisis, but not only ride it, but come out very strong, much stronger than how they entered it. And cloud kind of solutions will accelerate because of that, because simply uh, uh, because of the fact that you have cash pressure, and the cash pressure would convert itself into, like Sangeeta mentioned, as a service model, capex to opex. I see that model accelerate, and definitely we are partnering on that front with global service providers as well as local cloud service providers. The second aspect you have to consider is, in this country where software talent is so abundant, you can really use automation to reshape the ecosystem for the country. And I'll explain how. Fortune 1000 companies around the world that the global service providers based and headquartered out of this country serve will go through digital transformation. Exactly because of the point I mentioned, technology would be a lever to leapfrog the crisis. And if that happens, you have the local talent and the software capability to really lead that transformation for the entire world. And automation can help you get there, because you can now, as a company, hire the talent where they exist, whether it's a small city or a big city. So the transformation in terms of workplace will convert itself into people hiring everywhere around the country. So you can raise the bar on jobs within the country, but you can also reshape, using that talent, the digital transformation of Fortune 1000 in the world. So it's a significant opportunity that we can shape together. And again, a area that we are collaborating very closely with our global partners too. And the third point I would mention is this journey in some of the difficult segments. I would say difficult because it's been challenging to address the digital divide, education as an example, healthcare as an example in the country. And these are also the places where technology would play a very pivotal role towards not only solving for today, but also making the companies much stronger in the future. And here again, we are collaborating very closely. We have an initiative called PC Pathshala that we have launched, which is customers, startup partners, as well as system integrators all pulled together to really help students, parents, and teachers come and ease into this new normal of online education. So these are some of the examples of how we are collaborating with the ecosystem to raise all boats for the country as well as for the global system integrators.
Right. No, Mr. Singhani, and what's been your experience? Looking at partnering at a different new partnership models evolving for you in the crisis.
I'll just take a pause before I come to the models. I guess the first thing is the realization which most of the medium and large enterprises had in the lockdown period, and then that first realization was you can do more with less. There is a huge amount of inefficiencies which were built into their operations in their processes, which they suddenly realized are probably something which they need to they can let go of, and then those efficiencies were in the way they work and the way they engage with their consumers, how do they operate internally, how do they manage their workforce or their processes. So that realization has led to two things. A, they're trying to now get into a business model or operating model which has more automation and more intelligent workflows embedded inside those operating models. I'll explain what intelligent automation means to us. Uh, a typical automation would only take care of a process, and might be in a particular department or a business function. Intelligent automation probably would take care of it across the length and breadth of the organization, and might even expand beyond the organization to your suppliers, to your customer sites. And then these intelligent automations are kind of a self-healing automations which can take care of any uncertainties in the business and can help take business decisions. Now, with these intelligent automations being built in, the realization of the cost is becoming more and more clear to the enterprises, that there is a huge amount of inefficiencies and that can be taken out. And that's the pull that we are seeing from various enterprises for our business in IBM. The second thing what we are seeing here is how these enterprises are looking forward to invest their capital. Now, cash is king. It's become more and more obvious now. Nobody is very clear on where to put their capital on, and then everybody's trying to conserve the capital. Means as large organizations like the top 5 companies in the country to small and medium enterprises, everybody is trying to lock in their cash and kind of use it where it's really needed. And then capex is probably taken a back seat, and the model from capex to opex, what my colleagues told and in the panel, yes, that's out there. Uh, Clients are reaching out. They're asking for innovations in the uh, operating model of the transactions that we do with them. Some are asking for a deferred payment. Some are asking for service solution as a service or a software as a service kind of a model where things have to be pay per use basis. And then there are a few others who want to get into these innovation models of joint go to market for the future with us, or they're trying to leverage the cloud and the presence of IBM solutions on the clouds. But how do we take them as a service? But all that is leading to a situation where organizations are taking a real back step and in trying to conserve the cash and at the same time go ahead and modernize their operations and bringing these intelligent workflows to cut down the inefficiencies. Now, that's a very distinct trend we are looking at, and more demand that is coming to us is about how do you take the cost out and repurpose that cost for the growth of the business where it is needed now.
No, I'm very valid, logic, because most companies that we in our conversation what we understand is that there has been a natural resistance towards automation in many sectors. Some sectors have been great with that, like BFSI, for example, but most sectors, many other sectors have been reluctant. That divide, I think, is kind of shrinking now. Let me go to Mr. Krishnan. What's been your experience in this whole, the last 3 months of it? Are you seeing new kind of new kind of demand, client side demand emerging? Again, which end of the spectrum? I mean, there are certain demarcations in the when we talk about cloud, there are a particular kind of companies catering to a particular sector, particular size. What has been your sort of positioning, if I can ask?
So maybe first and foremost, I think some great perspectives on the previous question, and in some ways, just as an anecdote, Salesforce, broke this model of capex versus opex 20 years back, right? So at that point in time, we started our company with a slogan called "No Software." Fundamentally, we'd say that you don't need to invest in software to derive value later. You derive value and pay for it at the same time. So the pay-per-use model was something that was derived by us 20 years back when the term cloud didn't even exist. But coming to your question on the kind of demand that we are facing. So first and foremost, obviously there is a lot of technology that is being sought out in areas where there is a consumer engagement and people are looking to engage with new ways to engage with the consumers, right? So we are seeing an uptick in technologies that automate that, technologies that provide the ability for marketers to engage with their end consumers completely. People who have not done this are now looking at newer ways of finding and keeping their consumers engaged, right? So there are newer ways of creating communities. How do you keep your consumers engaged? How do you launch new products? So there are many aspects of digital that are coming in the process of engaging the consumers. The second part is also around the way you want to conduct business, which is your field force, the company's employees, right? In terms of various roles, be it in the sales aspects, be it in the service aspect. So you're looking at different tools being sought out, wherein the need for people to have physical paper or a physical engagement has to be reduced. And there is as much data and as much transparency and visibility that is provided to your ecosystem, right? Be it a company that is selling to another organization, or be it a company that sells through a distribution network. What people are trying to do is to make using digital platforms to make that information visible, right? Provide, inject more intelligence into that information so that decision making is augmented, right? Fundamentally, if you think of a sales process, what do we do in a typical seller is trying to augment his customer's intelligence, and through additional information, customer evaluates that information and then he makes a decision, right? So that phase has gone digital, right? And that, so customer discovers some aspect digitally. Now a sales guy needs to provide additional information to his potential customer, and then they take a decision together, right? You want to augment the customer's ability to take a decision in your favor, right? So that's in a very simple way how you're trying to automate the sales processes. And we are seeing this demand across all segments, right? It is not necessarily a technology that we are seeing in high demand in medium and large enterprises. They were the early adopters. They were the ones who automated these. Smaller companies, by virtue of the fact that they're typically entrepreneur driven, right? They're typically promoter driven, are much more agile in the context of change that is needed, right? They don't have complex decision making processes. So we see them taking a leap forward in creating these newer engagements, be it in terms of providing an app to their field force, be it in terms of tracking where their employees are. I had a CEO who came to one of our panels, and he talked about they had deployed the solution about 6 months back, sometime in December, and he put out a decade to his team that if it is not in the digital form, right? In this case, it was a Salesforce application. He said, I won't take that as data, right? Don't come to my meetings and tell me that, oh, you know what? Oh, leave that data out. I'll tell you this. So he put that culture up. So the CEO came into our meeting and he said, you know what? I'm so glad that I went through that process that time. And my field force in this time when people were locked down, I knew exactly what my field force was doing at all points in time. I knew exactly how many calls people were making, while it was operating differently, but he had the information to make decisions better. He had the visibility, and he could also communicate back with his field in a very different way, whether it was a direct field force or his dealer channel or his extended ecosystem, right? So that is something that we are seeing huge demand coming up. That's something that's an area where we will. I'm to Prakash's point, it is a huge opportunity in India, right? And it is an opportunity for the country to pivot and leapfrog in a much bigger way.
Right, right. I think, Prasid, you wanted to ask something.
Yeah, I think like while just talking about just as much as we have spoken about automation so far, the word intelligence keeps repeating. And the sort of the future that everybody sees is that everything will be intelligent. There'll be a lot of artificial intelligence and ML is going to take over. But if it is true, how far away are we from it? And what exactly is happening today? How intelligent are processes today?
Yeah.
And I think we should start with Mr. Malia on this one.
So basically, Prasid is asking when is Skynet going to become self-aware? That's what he's asking. Is that?
That's a good question.
If at all.
It's a journey, Prasid. I would say the artificial intelligence journey, we are not even in the first chapter. It's just beginning to unfold. Yeah, and it has begun to unfold because of few factors. One, the amount of data that came through became so large that human beings couldn't process it fast enough. You had networks that progressed to a point where the transmission of data became possible and the cloud became a reality. And the last bit was the software and algorithms reached a stage where the marrying of these three trends really accelerated it forward to where we are today. In terms of capacity and capability of solutions to do very high degree of determination, whether it is 99% accuracy on stores, whether you are out of inventory or not, that's possible. Very high degree of accuracy on face recognition in a security system, possible, and several other solutions like that. But here's the thing that we all need to really be clear on. Computers or digital machines do things in binary ways. It is 0 or 1, yes and no. Human beings have a continuum of possibilities. And that's what differentiates human beings and digital machines. So this concept that automation is going to become completely all pervasive and take on all the jobs is not really true, because the future belongs to a complementary world where the automation can do a lot of repetitive work, but the imagination, creativity, and inspiration will still come from human beings. And the way it will happen is, and the usages that India can pick can really leapfrog the nation. I'll give you a couple of them. Healthcare. Coming into this crisis, one realized that not only are we one doctor to 1,100 citizens, we are also short staffed across the board. So if you have a complementary approach to healthcare going in and coming out of this crisis, where you use technology to complement the skills you have through telehealth, telemedicine, it would be a great net positive impact. Another case would be education. You have got so many different, you have 85 scheduled languages in this country, probably 10,000 or so informally spoken dialects. What if, using automation and AI kind of tools, you convert this or part of technology into a platform that really brings everybody together on education and raises the board on talent and skills and capability in this country? How game changing will that be? So these are a couple of examples where machines and what they do very well, combined with creativity and ingenuity of human beings, can really be inspirational for the country.
Got it. That sounds really futuristic in one way, but I don't think that's what we are seeing just yet. And what you're saying is essentially that we're getting there, essentially, right? So, Kamal, if Mr. Singhani, if you would like to add to this, because Watson, of course, has been all pervasive in some ways.
Yes, you're right. So IBM has kind of a mastered via Watson solutions, anything and everything to do with AI. I'll probably say that the AI is there, and then there are use cases, there are business processes where AI is making a very significant impact on the way the business is run and the efficiency that it is bringing in. But before I go into the AI, let me just talk about automation and the digital automation and the way this entire automation is moving out. So on one end, extreme end of our work of the automation is where you have high volume and you have something which is very repetitive. And that is what we earlier used to call as virtual workforce. The bots and the automations which we have done through RPAs and all that was primarily taking care of that one extreme end, which is high volume and repetitive work. More and more usage of technologies and automation is now moving and shifting towards the left, which is unique work and a low volume. And when you have to get yourselves embedded into this kind of a work, some of the examples that you spoke of, healthcare. Now, this healthcare is a unique work. You cannot provide same solution or the same healthcare medicine to everybody. So it's a unique solution. Might be high volume in some cases, but what happens in such situations is you need to embed technologies along with the human. And the workforce that is just going to be, we call it as a digital workforce. It is where the automation, the bots, and the digital and the AI solutions coexist with humans. And then that is where humans adapt a decision-making process, or they are kind of supported by the decision-making from the AI intelligent solutions. And then takes it towards what I'm just trying to say we are experiencing with many of our clients in the country. AI is getting embedded a lot in the front end as well as at the back end processes. Just to case an example, and spoken in some other forums as well, there are clients of ours who have taken the Watson solutions and they have embedded it in the claims management process, let's say in the insurance sector. The entire car damage analytics, which is now possible, where you can just simply click a picture of your damaged car in case you, God forbid, go to have an accident and upload it through your app, and then at a back end, the entire AI-led decision making takes over. And then it has the details of various models of the car from the history. It has been curated to understand what cost does it take for a typical kind of a damage, and compare that your picture with other pictures, and then very quickly come back to a very near accurate assessment of the damage. Now, that is something which is currently happening in the country. Just taking one example, there are many such examples which are happening out there, which are bringing AI much more closer to our day-to-day workforce, and that is where the automation is moving from very repetitive job taken virtual workforce to a digital workplace. Now, humans do, or let's say the assistants do exist, coexist with these AI solutions, because not all solutions can be and all cases can be solved. But now you are taking the job profiles a notch higher. The people who were earlier working on standard solutions or going through these mundane claims processing is now only looking at very unique cases. So low volume unique cases with a assisted by AI, where AI gives you the level of confidence, is what our Watson solutions are all about, and that is where you go ahead and take much more smarter and a better decisions. So these things are getting far more pervasive in our day-to-day business operations. It's only that some enterprises have marched ahead of the time. Others are realizing in this pandemic, if they can start adapting those technologies and those solutions, probably they would catch up. But those who have already adapted, who have already invested in that, they will be marching ahead of the rest.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm going to quickly go to Mr. Krishnan, and Ms. Gupta, I'll come to you after that because I want to tweak the question a little bit when I put it to you.
Sure, sure, Prasid. So, Prasid, I think extremely well articulated point by both Prakash and Kamal. So I'll talk about two concepts here. One is AI in its sense of which is the esoteric sense of trying to solve really complex world problems, right? Let's say one of the areas which I don't think we have done too well is something around predicting what model or how the disease is going to be coming up in the future, right? So we have had multiple models, almost everything has failed. So that's one side of where you could use technology to predict how the disease spread is going to be. On the other side of using AI is around really more applying it into your day-to-day processes. It's something as simple as in a sales guy's process, can I give him the intelligence to tell him what should be his next best engagement with his prospective customer? Something as simple as that. I call that as an applied AI, which is embedded into your day-to-day systems. It is embedded into your day-to-day actions, so that, to Prakash's point, that 0 to 1 continuum of a computer, you bridge that with the human element, and you provide that continuum with additional data so that the human intellect thereafter takes better decisions, right? So fundamentally things around next best action, right? So what should be the next in a call center, customer calls in, here is a discussion he's having on a service request. I have his entire history. That's the right time to probably tell him, you know what, here is the wonderful upsell of a product Y, that if it goes with it solves the problem in a much more elegant, better way, right? It could have started as a simple how-to question, could lead to, by virtue of you embedding intelligence into that process, could lead to an additional revenue or a growth opportunity, right? So fundamentally, there are two continuums here. You want to use AI to solve really complex problems, because that's the power of that technology. Computing has become, I'm actually waiting for the day when quantum computing comes in, and it really changes the game out there, right? And then then we are talking about disease prediction, better radiologist's ability in order to better predict a cancer or a disease and prevent pandemics from happening much ahead of the situation that we are in today, right? So that's one aspect of it. Other one is leveraging this technology in everyday processes, and that's where you want to look at technologies, applications that come embedded with it, right? So at Salesforce, we embed what we call, Watson's smarter brother. We call it Einstein. So, so Einstein is embedded into our processes. It's something that goes into everyday life of all the personas that we cover, be it the seller, be it the marketer, be it the customer service persona, right, or be it the chief of revenue, the e-commerce person. You want to embed intelligence across all these processes so that it enhances either your revenue opportunity or a service opportunity. End of the day, provide better customer experience, which leads to better growth and better success for your company.
True. In fact, this is something somebody told me recently, that we needed a pandemic to train the AI on pandemics. So,
I wish
Very
it doesn't
costly way
have
to train.
at least exactly.
so just one, when I put this question to you, India, when the startups that are creating here, we also think mobile first. All of these startups, we are going after the next billion. We are creating for devices that are very, let's say, low end and everything. So this the same question, but how do you see it being approached here?
Sure. No, I think it's a great way, and I think the panelists have really shared great perspectives. I just want to reiterate a couple of points first. One, I think fully agree with everybody saying AI is about augmentation. It is not about replacing humans. So it will augment what the humans are doing and it'll be a great productivity innovation tool to enable a lot of what we want to do. I think the second important imperative is clearly about the fact that today AI has worked well in a clearly defined process, right? So if it's a point solution or a very defined use case, it's worked very well. But I think when you think about implementation of AI at scale, especially in India, I really would not be able to come up with any great examples because, like Prakash said, it's the start of a journey, and I think it'll take us a while to get there. There are over 400 plus AI startups in the country, and as we track them, they're building out a varied area of solutions, whether it's about field management, whether it's about agri-tech, whether it's in the healthcare space, whether it's about cancer diagnostics that the previous panelists spoke about. So clearly they are in a wide array of areas already. And they are building for Bharat. They are building low-cost resource setting solutions, and how they can scale for the next billion. But I think a couple of challenges that we have to deal with as a country is the access and availability of data, especially if you look at sectors like agriculture, healthcare, education. Unlike the banking and the BFSI sector, where there was more digitization and hence access to data was much better, I think these sectors lack data that you can build and perfect your models on. So one of NASSCOM's key recommendation to the government has always been about think of data as a strategic asset, and this is data that is anonymized. This is data that will not be personally identifiable. This is data that is from public services as opposed to anything that companies are creating. But I think if we could find a good data infrastructure as part of our digital India vision, you'll see a lot more innovation happening at scale for us to be able to train our AI engines, for us to be able to produce more innovative solutions. So, I mean, like the pandemic, we've talked about how all the modeling is failing. I think a simple thing we did was create a task force of a few companies. Intel was leading that, and a few other, all the leading companies gave in their resources. And we did not try predicting what is happening, but really looked at all the data sources and provided it as a listening tool saying, okay, if cases are increasing, these many hospital beds you need, this is the amount of PPE you need, this is the kind of, this is the kind of district which are more hotspots. So it can work with better quality data, but I would say that, stop thinking of data as as oil. I'd really say think of data like water. It needs to be clean and accessible.
Very valid point. Let me come back to the automation question. You've already answered this to some extent, Sangeeta. You've said that technology is not going to replace human beings. Uh, uh, I agree. Largely, yes. I'll give you an example of our own industry, the media industry. In some newsrooms of the world, robots or the AI is already writing news stories. If you go to sports, if you look at market stories, some of it is already being generated by programs, by algos. Do you see, the question that a lot of people are asking, once we emerge from the crisis, do you see the recovery to some extent jobless, in the sense that people who were employed, gainfully employed before the pandemic, may not come back to doing the same jobs? Maybe they have to move up the value chain to some extent because some of their roles would have been replaced by technology. Do you see that happening? I'll start with Sangeeta and then I'll go to others as well.
Sure. No, I think it's a great question. I think there will be an impact on jobs as we come back from the crisis. I don't think all of that will be driven by technology. A lot of that will be driven by other factors of complete irreversible shifts that are taking place in some of the most impacted sectors. I think we firmly believe technology will always end up creating more jobs. Yes, some of the more repetitive, lower end jobs that have now been automated or enabled, it will actually enable people to move up the value chain and add value to those jobs. I think the new blended work model where you're working from home and working from office will also create an opportunity for a lot of people who otherwise could not work, whether it's women or people in tier 2, tier 3 cities, but had the right skills or could have upskilled themselves. I think in some ways this crisis can actually accelerate job creation for sectors that were earlier not part of the formal workforce. So I would continue to believe that job creation will continue to be enabled through technology and automation. Yes, skill sets will change, and every company, governments, individuals have to invest in upskilling themselves. Each one of us have a responsibility to do that. It can't be that it won't happen.
No, I agree. Let me go to Ms. Singhani and then to the other panelists.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with Sangeeta here that the impact of pandemic and the job impact it would have much more for the other factors and because of other factors other than the technology or for that matter automation and AI. I guess those factors are going to impact the business models and the way the businesses are run. But automation AI probably because of the technology it would change the nature of the job rather than taking the job away. It will change the nature of the job. And then the $1 million question for most of the organization is my workforce ready for that? And then the question here is, what is your workplace going to look like? Then you need to look at what's your workforce is going to do then. So if your workplace is going to be uh, uh, embedded with automations and artificial intelligence, or for that matter, be far more human and technology collaborated one. And then your business processes would be far more efficient. I guess then you would definitely need to repurpose, reskill, as well as retrain your staff to adapt to that digital as well as a new high-end skills which they would need. So unless you understand your workplace, you will not be able to predict what kind of a workforce you will have, and then that is the way out to kind of have a positive impact of this AI or automation impact on your workplace and change the way the people work and what they work on.
Right. Mr. Male, you want to also want to answer that? I mean, how is this is going to impact our livelihood? Technology is going to take away our jobs. We need to upskill. What do we need to do now?
I will start with answering that question by referring to a study that I read. Fortune did run an article where they talked about they evaluated past crisis, and data out of the past crisis suggested that only 9% of the companies that were leading their industry before the crisis showed up as leaders after the crisis. Only 9%. And majority of them either lost the lead or they were laggards at the end of the crisis. So the first one to really think about is this is the time for disruption. And if you are really doubting that, you have to see some of the shape of the industries and how it is real time getting reshaped, whether it's digital media, entertainment, cloud service providers, technology overall, healthcare. Every segment is disrupting. And the pace of this change is not only because of COVID. I think COVID crunched the trends into very short order, but these trends will even accelerate past COVID. So the first thing is you are living in an age where the time is going to be really going very fast. The pace of change would accelerate. The first response to that would be, as businesses and as employees, one has to adopt a mindset of continuously evolving, continuously adapting, continuously learning new things, because that would be the only determinant for success in future. Keeping an open mind, your ability to learn new things really fast would determine your success or failure in future, as a company, as a culture, and as an employee, or as a community in general, or as a country for that matter. And yeah, that translates back to answering your question whether automation will take away our jobs. I would stand by what I mentioned in the past, which was automation will play a role in complementing what human beings do. But that does not mean that human beings will continue or should continue doing at a skill level that they already have. Because when automation increases, the skill level and the capability level for human beings to be able to play the complementary role will also get stepped up. The demand for skills to be able to exercise judgment, exercise creativity, ingenuity, arts, literature, different industries combined with automation would be the magic of the future. And really, constant reskilling, constantly disrupting yourself would be the only way forward, in my opinion.
No, I think everybody, just going back in history, everybody remembers how bank unions went on strike when there was this talk of making computers computerization of bank branches. They all went on strike.
Right.
Now you cannot imagine branches without computers. Let me go to Mr. Krishnan. Same question. What do you think?
So let me give you. I'll give you two perspectives here. One was around what I'm seeing in the context of speaking to one of the CEOs of FMCG companies. The pandemic has also given them an opportunity to become more efficient. They were running something like about 3,000 SKUs at one point in time. During the pandemic, they focused on 300. Is he going to go back to 3,000? The answer is no. He said, no, this is the new baseline. He has removed a lot of inefficiencies, and that becomes a new baseline from where he's starting, right? So that will that create more joblessness? I don't think so. What it is doing is that while it has saved some money, while it has given them additional focus, it has given him a new opportunity to focus on a completely new set of product segments that are emerging through this crisis, right? So that's one way of looking at when you save something somewhere, you have the opportunity to innovate in another area, right? The second aspect is, I'll give you an example of one of our customers. This is L&T Reality, right? Definitely an industry that's going through an extremely tough phase, a customer of ours. During the pandemic, what they did was they actually got their employees to start leveraging. We have a training tool, a learning tool called Trailhead. So all their employees, all the field force were put on that platform and to learn how they could use and leverage the Salesforce technology that they'd already invested in. To a point, as a company, they logged in something like about 2 lakh plus points. There was an internal competition during the lockdown, especially the hard phase of the lockdown. They really used that opportunity and the availability of a platform to recalibrate how their sellers would operate as they were coming out, right? So that was one thing that we saw. Another very unique trend, we all noticed during the last especially few months, especially in the context of schools, right? Schools devising new apps just to track attendance of students, or hospitals coming out with new apps to, handling some of the new COVID processes that they need to do in the hospitals. We are starting to see a new trend around low-code app development, and I'll come to this aspect in a sense that this low-code app development, which it's been existing for a long time, right? It's not for that this technology didn't exist, but what this crisis has done is that it has started, and as companies are more like going for more digitization, they've realized that they need to have some form of developer capability within their business users, because they can't really wait for their IT systems to come in or a developer company to come and solve their problems. They have an idea, needs to be done today, and needs to be out in the field tomorrow, right? So we are starting to see a new trend around low code app development, which, by the way, existed, as I said, but the pandemic has brought that into the focus. All of a sudden, your teachers are coding. All of a sudden, your bank employees are coding, right? Think about it this way: the beauty of low code is that it turns all the business people into citizen developers, expands the capability of the entire IT force, which is already digital in the new world, right? So that's something that we are seeing: automation in some sense, but at the same time, reskilling and putting that new opportunity in a new skill in a workforce, which enables new innovation, faster business processes, more agility.
No, I agree completely. Opportunity is, I think, the answer. I mean, that explains why so many TikTok clones have have, have appeared overnight. Soon after the
Yes,
ban.
absolutely.
I wanted to ask a question.
In just sticking with Mr. Christian, like you said, low code app development is something that has existed for a while. This whole the acceleration and automation is going to help the industry itself grow much faster. And I'm not talking just from a business point of view, just from a tech point of view, everything grows faster, right? Could you outline that, how that is happening through this right now?
No, so like clearly said, right? Low-code app development always existed, right? And fundamentally, the Salesforce platform is one of that, right? The Force.com platform is the Lightning platform, is a low-code app development platform. What it does is that it brings extensibility of applications in the context of business at a much rapid pace, right? So what that again does is it brings MVPs to life much faster, right? It brings greater ability to react to a situation, right? And that's what is needed in these times. Have we seen the tomorrow in this pandemic? Have you seen the end gate on this? Obviously not. Be it economic, be it the disease or be it how we will operate. We won't. I don't think it's we. If anyone, the matter is out there, right? So we will have to wait for this to emerge. Companies will need to be constantly relooking at everything that they are doing today. And yes, so these are aspects that companies can then start looking at. How do I make my workforce more able to operate, more able to be more agile at the same time and react and change faster? Do I operate on a platform that allows that my organization to change at a faster pace?
Right.
Yeah.
We are
Uh,
almost. Yeah. Sorry, Prasid. You wanted to ask. Sorry. Please
I,
go
I
ahead.
was I was just moving to Mr. Malia. I was going to ask
Right.
him,
Sure.
what he sees in this frame.
Proceed. What specifically would you, if you can elaborate a little more?
So what I was asking is, the fact that so much new use cases, so many new use cases are coming up for automation, that will help the industry itself to create new solutions. Just do a faster R&D and everything. So are you seeing examples of that already?
Like overnight innovations.
I feel the level of automation in general can definitely go up in India. And there are a couple of examples where it has started to pick up and has seen massive impact. Digital payments is a great place where you saw government putting in the rails, whether it is digital IDs, whether it is UPI as a transaction engine, and then you had innovators and startups innovating. So you have seen that rocket in COVID. But if you look at in totality, the cash transactions versus the digital payments is still digital payments is very small proportion. So I see that as a great example of automation really going very, very fast due to pandemic. And I see that accelerate and create more efficiency longer term in the country. The other example would be e-commerce. Just think about it. If e-commerce and the engines of delivery did not exist all over the country during lockdown, it would have been way worse in terms of supply of essentials for to all parts of the country. So that is yet another case where automation has helped citizens in a really material way. And I see opportunities like that only go up in future simply because you have a situation like this crisis, and all countries including India, I feel, will index towards building resilience rather than building efficiency. And what that resilience would mean is you would have buildup of local supply chains, local innovation, local ecosystem. And that would also include when you have innovators combining automation with real world issues, real world challenges, you can have very interesting solutions to almost every vertical: retail, healthcare, logistics, to transportation. Almost every vertical can get disrupted in the country because the level of automation is not very high.
Right. So risk mitigation is likely to be the key driver over all these decisions.
Correct. Correct.
I have time for just one final question. We are almost out of time. This is a question, philosophical question, which I keep asking myself: is technology going to finally liberate us, or is it going to tie us down to our workplaces further? I'll go to all of you. Please answer. We are almost out of time. I'll start with Mr. Krishnan, and then I'll go to everybody else.
I think liberation will always remain a personal feeling. I think technology will enable, that access to information, which will provide more liberty to people in their choices, in their decision making, right? In that sense, yeah. So I don't think you can miss technology in this new world, irrespective of whether it is in the business side or the societal side, right? Maybe I'll, Debashir, I just wanted to take this opportunity to leave 5 questions to people in the context of, as we are seeing a lot of information, a lot of aspects around technology, a lot of new emerging scenarios for people to think about, right? In the context of how they're reacting to the businesses, how they're reacting to the situation. Number one is what I would want ask people is to think about which of your previous expectations you need to rethink. Right. So that's a question that I would want people to ask themselves. Which of your previous expectations do you need to rethink? Which of your consumers are valuing things in what different way, right? Consumers are starting to value things differently. So start asking those questions in your business. What might your consumers value differently in this new world, right? So think of that as a point. Third one, what are the biggest threats to your current business in this world, right? Ask that question. You will find a certain set of answers in your decision making framework. Fourth, what new providers, models, or business models are better positioned today, right? And that's the point where you can learn from, right? Which are the companies, which are the business models that are better positioned in these times? That can help you take a decision how you want to react to this. And then last is the aspect of building capabilities, building assets, building relationships in this new world. You have to start thinking about these framework. If people can ask these 5 questions in how they are operating, I'm sure you will find an answer to that. Will it be technology underneath it? I don't know, right? Some of them could be something as simple as behavioral. But will technology enable that? I would say yes, technology can enable many of these aspects.
Right. No, we'll rush through the answers. Mr. Malia, your answer.
I would say technology is super important. Technology is more important now than ever. But I wouldn't say it can solve everything, because purpose is very important, in my opinion. Because with purpose, you can really come together and collaborate across the industry to solve real challenges. How do we make how do we use technology to make it more responsible in terms of usage, or create more responsible use cases? How do we leverage technology to make the industry or world more inclusive, as an example? How do we make the world more sustainable combined as an industry? So all of those challenges also become relevant, and you can never take the human out of the equation. So we are all working from home here, but I would never say that work from home is the only mode, because social connect, and we are social beings, and without that social connection, I do not think as a society we will progress further. So it's a combination that with technology along with great humanity.
Mr. Singhani.
Well, I would say in short term, technology would play a huge impact and a huge role for the corporations and for the enterprises to come out of this crisis post pandemic. If you are not leveraging technology to its best and embedding the technology into your processes and trying to understand your consumer more, that how do they would adapt to your usage of technology, you will have a crisis in your hand. So in the short term, leverage technologies as much as you can, get your organization into an efficient organization, do the cost takeouts using technologies. There would be time for you to go beyond technologies and do things beyond technology. Short term, get onboarded on the technology.
Sangeeta.
Yeah, so I think in the lockdown, if technology did not exist, we would have been in a real complete lockdown as a country, right? So I think technology has been the savior for India in this or across the world, right? Today, whether it's virtual collaboration, meetings, our family get-togethers, everything's happening with technology. But I think totally agree with Prakash's points, right? Technology is not a means to an end. Technology is an enabler, it's a foundation. It has to be looked at in conjunction with everything around you, whether it's the objectives that you stand for, the values of the organization, the mission that you want to accomplish, and of course, expertise of domain, right? So I really think that technology is a great enabler. It's a force multiplier, and I think we have to use it for making all of those objectives for our businesses, for our country at large.
No, that's the important word, the force multiplier. This discussion can go on forever, but we are almost we're actually over time. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Look forward to having all of you soon again in one of our panel discussions. Thank you so much. Thanks so much from me and Prashant.
And thanks,
Thank you.
thanks, Prashit and
Thanks to
Debashri.
everyone.
Be safe.
Thanks to both of you, and thanks to all my panelists.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.